I came home from work on an unremarkable Tuesday evening. The streets were quiet, the November air biting as I fumbled with the keys to the front door. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The house was eerily silent. No clinking of dishes in the kitchen, no faint hum of the television in the living room. Just emptiness. I called out for Sarah, my wife of 10 years. My voice echoed back to me, swallowed by the stillness. The eerie feeling deepened when I walked into the kitchen and saw the folded note on the counter, her handwriting unmistakable on the front. For Daniel. I hesitated before picking it up. My heart pounded, my mind racing through every possibility. I unfolded the paper, and the message was as succinct as it was baffling. I need some time. Don't worry about me. I'll be back. No explanation, no indication of where she was going, just this cryptic statement. For hours, I paced the living room, alternating between confusion and anger. I called her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted her, only to see the messages go unread. By morning, there was still no word from her. I considered calling the police, but the note didn't indicate foul play. It hinted at something deliberate, something she had planned. For the next week, I lived in a limbo of anxiety and dread. Every knock at the door, every vibration of my phone sent a spike of adrenaline through me. I slept on the couch, afraid I'd miss her coming home. I even called a few of her closest friends, but none of them claimed to know where she was. She mentioned needing space. One of them said reluctantly. I didn't think she meant disappearing. Then, 7 days later, she walked through the door as if nothing had happened. Sarah? I stood frozen, unsure whether to embrace her or demand answers. She looked tired, her clothes wrinkled, but there was a strange calm about her. I'm back, she said simply, dropping a thick envelope onto the dining table. We need to talk. Inside the envelope were papers, documents for a house purchase. A house I didn't know existed. The buyer's name was printed in bold, Daniel Whitaker. My name. What is this? I stammered, flipping through the papers, my hands shaking. The address on the deed was unfamiliar, and the purchase amount made my stomach churn. It was a hefty sum, far beyond what we had saved. It's ours, she said, her voice calm, almost detached. A new beginning. But I didn't buy this, I said, my voice rising. I don't even know where this place is. Sarah, what the hell is going on? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she met my gaze with a strange mixture of guilt and defiance. I'll explain everything. You deserve to know the truth. The house of lies. Sarah sat at the dining table, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, knuckles white. She avoided my gaze as I stared at the stack of papers on the table between us. The documents were official, title deeds, mortgage agreements, and even a loan approval in my name. Every detail screamed legitimacy, yet it was impossible. I hadn't signed anything. You're going to explain, I said, my voice firm, though my insides churned with unease. Right now. She sighed deeply and finally looked up at me. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. What does that mean, Sarah? What way? Did you forge my name? Use my credit? She flinched but didn't deny it. Her silence was louder than any confession. My mind spun. The betrayal was immediate and suffocating. Yet I didn't have the full picture. Why, Sarah? What is this house for? Why would you do this without me? There was a long pause before she spoke. I thought it would be a good surprise. A fresh start for us. Her words were shaky, and I caught the crack in her voice, but something about them didn't sit right. A surprise? A week-long disappearance? A mortgage in my name without my consent? None of this added up. And you didn't think to tell me? I said, trying to keep the anger in check. You didn't think to ask me before making a life-altering financial decision? A house. Her face crumpled. I know I should have told you. I needed to take care of it before it was too late. Too late for what? I asked, leaning forward. Sarah, you're talking in circles. What's really going on? For a fleeting second, I thought I saw fear in her eyes. It was gone just as quickly, replaced by a practiced calm. It's complicated, she said finally, standing up from the table, but I'll make it right. I'll fix everything. I grabbed her wrist before she could walk away. No, we're not leaving this conversation until you tell me the truth. Why did you disappear? And who is this house really for? Her breath hitched, and I noticed her lower lip tremble. It was the first crack in her facade. Daniel, I swear. It's for us, she whispered. You just need to trust me. The words hit me like a slap. Trust her? After all this? My mind cycled through every possibility. Debt, an affair, a bad investment. Each scenario seemed worse than the last. The woman I had built a life with, the woman I trusted more than anyone else in the world, had gone behind my back in a way I never thought possible. I need answers, Sarah, I said, my voice shaking with restrained fury. I'm going to dig into this, whether you like it or not. And if you're hiding something... Her hand shot up. Please, just give me some time. I'll explain everything, I promise. Just not tonight. No, I stood up now, towering over her. You don't get to stall me anymore. You don't get to manipulate this conversation. What is the truth, Sarah? Her eyes filled with tears. It's for us, she repeated, almost like a mantra. Please believe me. But I didn't. I couldn't. That night, after she went to bed, I sat with the papers in the dim light of the living room. I examined every page, every clause, every signature. My name was there, but it wasn't my handwriting. The house was registered under my name, but Sarah was listed as the co-applicant. A deeper dive into the loan paperwork revealed something even more unsettling. The loan had been approved based on my credit score and income alone. I opened my laptop and searched for the address on the deed. It was in a neighborhood across town, one I didn't recognize. Using satellite maps, I saw the property. A modest two-story home with a neatly trimmed lawn and a red door. It looked idyllic, but the pit in my stomach deepened. I knew I had never seen this place before, but Sarah, she had. My next call was to the bank listed on the loan agreement. The conversation was curt and professional. They confirmed that the mortgage was indeed in my name, processed a week ago. When I asked for details, the representative mentioned an in-person meeting, one I obviously hadn't attended. My blood ran cold when the rep casually said, "Your wife provided all the necessary documents. Everything seemed in order." That was it. Proof of her deception. But why? Why would she do this? And more importantly, who else was involved? I shut the laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't just about money anymore. There was something much darker beneath the surface, and I was determined to uncover it. The stranger at the house. By morning, my resolve had hardened. Sarah's vague assurances weren't going to cut it. I wasn't the kind of man who sat idly by while his life spiraled out of control. As she sipped her coffee in silence, I announced my plan. I'm going to the house today. Her head snapped up, and for a fleeting second, I caught something in her expression. Panic, maybe fear. She quickly masked it, but I'd seen enough. Why? She asked, her voice laced with a forced casualness. It's not ready yet. There's nothing to see. That's not your decision, I said firmly. I'm listed as the owner, remember? I want to see this house you apparently bought for us. She opened her mouth, perhaps to protest, but I was already grabbing my coat. You can come with me, I said coldly, or you can stay here and keep lying. Either way, I'm going. She stayed. The drive to the address was nerve-wracking. Every mile felt heavier than the last as I imagined what I might find. I replayed her strange behavior, her cryptic excuses, her refusal to give me a straight answer. By the time I pulled up to the property, my chest was tight with anticipation. The house looked exactly as it had on the satellite map. Modest, neat, almost too perfect. The kind of place you'd picture in a magazine for suburban bliss. But it didn't feel like our house. It felt foreign, wrong. I parked and approached the front door, the deed in my hand. I half expected it to be locked, but it wasn't. The door creaked open under my hand, revealing an empty interior. The air smelled faintly of paint and new carpet, the kind of sterile freshness that comes with recent construction. For a moment, I stood in the foyer, taking it all in. The living room was bare except for a single folding chair and a coffee mug on the floor. My pulse quickened. Someone had been here recently. I wandered further inside, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The house felt hollow, like a shell, but something about it prickled the back of my neck. It wasn't just empty. It was expectant, like it was holding its breath. That's when I heard it, a shuffle upstairs. My heart jumped into my throat. I froze, listening. Another shuffle, followed by the faint creak of floorboards. Someone was here. Hello? I called out, my voice firm but shaking. Who's there? No answer. I swallowed hard and reached for my phone, ready to call the police, but something stopped me. I needed to see this through, to know the truth before involving anyone else. My feet carried me up the stairs, each step creaking louder than the last. The second floor was eerily quiet. The hallway stretched ahead, leading to several empty rooms. My eyes darted to the door at the far end. It was closed, unlike the others. I approached slowly, my breath shallow. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob and twisted it open. Inside, a man stood by the window, his back to me. He was tall, dressed in a plain black jacket and jeans. His presence was as startling as it was infuriating. Who the hell are you? I demanded. The man turned slowly, his face calm, almost indifferent. He had a sharp jawline, dark eyes, and an air of casual arrogance that made my skin crawl. You must be Daniel, he said, his tone smooth and unbothered. We were wondering when you'd show up. We. My voice rose. What the hell is going on? Why are you in my house? He smiled faintly, a small, condescending curve of his lips. Your house? That's an interesting way to put it. I clenched my fists, my patience evaporating. Answer the question. Now. He sighed, as if I were the one inconveniencing him, and stepped closer. This isn't as complicated as you think, he said, but it's also not something you're going to like hearing. What are you talking about? He tilted his head slightly, studying me with a kind of detached amusement. You're here because Sarah brought you into this. She thought she could handle it on her own, but clearly, she underestimated you. The mention of her name was like a spark to a powder keg. What do you know about my wife? I growled, stepping forward. The man didn't flinch. More than you do, apparently. I grabbed his jacket, shoving him against the wall. You're going to tell me everything right now, or I swear to God. She's been lying to you for years, he interrupted, his voice cold and cutting. About me, about this house, about everything. You think she bought this place for you? For your family? No, Daniel. She bought it for us. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I staggered back, my mind reeling. What are you saying? His expression hardened, all traces of amusement gone. Sarah and I have been together for 3 years. This house was supposed to be our escape, our new life. He smirked, as if the irony was too delicious to ignore. But I guess she didn't tell you that, did she? I stared at him, unable to speak. The room felt like it was closing in, my lungs struggling to draw breath. My wife, my Sarah, had been living a double life. And now, the cracks in our perfect marriage had finally split wide open. For what felt like an eternity, I stood there, unable to form a coherent thought. My mind refused to accept what this stranger was telling me. My wife, the woman I'd spent a decade building a life with, had bought a house for herself and him? You're lying, I finally managed, though my voice sounded weak, even to me. Sarah wouldn't do that. She couldn't. The man? No, the intruder. Simply crossed his arms, his expression one of cold certainty. Think what you want. It doesn't change the facts. I took a step closer, my chest heaving with a mix of fury and desperation. Who are you? He smirked, like the question amused him. Name's Tyler, but I think you're more interested in why I'm here than who I am. I wanted to hit him, to wipe that smug look off his face. But more than anything, I wanted answers. Real answers. Why don't you enlighten me, Tyler? What is this place? And what the hell are you doing with my wife? He leaned casually against the wall, as if we were old friends catching up over coffee. This place is supposed to be our new home, he said. Me and Sarah. She's been planning this for months. Hell, years, probably. She used your credit, your spotless history, to make it happen. And when the time was right, she was going to leave you behind. The words felt like venom, sinking deep and spreading through my veins. I shook my head, refusing to believe it. No, I said through gritted teeth. You don't know what you're talking about. Sarah loves me. She'd never. Wake up, Daniel. Tyler snapped, his voice suddenly sharp. She's been playing you like a fiddle. You think I just showed up out of nowhere? I've been in the picture for years. And you? You were the safety net. The reliable husband she kept around to fund her little escape plan. I staggered back, the weight of his words threatening to crush me. Memories flooded my mind. Sarah's late nights at work, the mysterious calls she always took in private, the way she'd been distant for months, if not longer. It all started to make sense in the worst possible way. But I needed more than his word. I needed proof. I pointed at him, my hand trembling. You've got a big mouth, Tyler, but you haven't shown me anything that proves a damn thing. Where's your evidence? He raised an eyebrow, then shrugged. Fine. You want proof? I've got plenty. He pulled his phone from his pocket, tapped the screen a few times, and then turned it toward me. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. The screen showed a series of photos, all of them damning. Tyler and Sarah together at a beach, at a restaurant, in what looked like a hotel room. In one, they were kissing, her hands on his chest, her eyes filled with a joy I hadn't seen in years. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My knees buckled, and I had to grab the doorframe to steady myself. No, I whispered, shaking my head. This isn't real. It's as real as it gets, Tyler said, his tone devoid of sympathy. She was supposed to tell you eventually, you know, after the baby was born. I froze. Baby? My voice was barely audible. Oh, she didn't tell you that part either, huh? Tyler said, his smirk returning. She's pregnant. And before you get any ideas, it's mine. The room spun, and I thought I might collapse. Pregnant? My wife was pregnant, and it wasn't mine. Every fiber of my being screamed in denial, but deep down, I knew he wasn't lying. Sarah's behavior, her secrecy, the sudden rush to buy a house, it all added up. She hadn't been planning a new life for us. She was building a future with Tyler. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. You're a piece of shit, I growled. You come into my life, wreck my marriage, and you stand here like you're proud of it? Tyler's smirk faded, replaced by something colder. Don't act like the victim, Daniel. You didn't lose Sarah because of me. You lost her because you weren't enough. Before I could stop myself, my fist connected with his jaw. He stumbled back, clutching his face, but he recovered quickly, his eyes blazing. Careful, Daniel, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You don't want to make this worse for yourself. Get out, I spat, my voice trembling with rage. Get the hell out of my house. Now. He raised his hands in mock surrender. Fine, but you should know this isn't over. Sarah's going to have to choose. And trust me, she's already made up her mind. With that, he pushed past me and walked out, leaving the door swinging open behind him. I stood there, trembling, my mind a storm of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. I had to confront Sarah. There was no avoiding it now. But first, I needed to collect myself. Because when I faced her, I wouldn't just be looking for answers. I'd be demanding the truth, and I wouldn't stop until I had it. I drove home in silence, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Tyler's words echoed in my head, each one cutting deeper than the last. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer force of keeping myself together. Sarah was sitting in the living room, her legs curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even flinch when I slammed the door behind me. She looked up, startled, when I stepped into the room. You went to the house, didn't you? She asked, her voice low, almost resigned. You knew I would, I said. My tone was sharp, biting. But you didn't think I'd meet your little boyfriend there, did you? Her face paled, and the phone slipped from her hands. Tyler was there, she whispered. I laughed bitterly, pacing the room like a caged animal. Oh, he was there, all right. Gave me quite the tour. Told me all about your plans. Your house, your fresh start. And the baby. Oh, let's not forget about the baby. Her hands flew to her stomach instinctively, and that small gesture was all the confirmation I needed. I stopped pacing and glared at her, waiting for her to say something, anything, but she just sat there, silent, tears brimming in her eyes. "Say something, Sarah," I barked, my voice breaking. "Tell me it's not true. Tell me this isn't what it looks like." I can explain," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Then explain," I shouted, throwing my arms out. "Explain how my wife of 10 years forged my signature, used my credit, and bought a house for herself and another man. Explain how you've been lying to me for years, Sarah. Explain how you could do this to me." She stood slowly, her legs unsteady beneath her. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tyler wasn't supposed to." "Tyler wasn't supposed to what?" I cut her off. "Tell me the truth, because God knows you weren't going to." Her lips quivered, and the tears finally spilled over. "I was going to tell you," she said, her voice breaking. "I swear I was. I didn't know how." "You didn't know how?" I repeated, incredulous. "How about starting with the truth? How about not cheating on me in the first place?" "I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't plan for this to happen, Daniel. Tyler and I, it just happened." I laughed bitterly. "You don't just happen into a 3-year affair and a pregnancy, Sarah. Don't insult me." She looked down at her hands, wringing them as if trying to squeeze the guilt out of her veins. "I didn't love him at first," she said quietly. "It was just an escape. You were always working, always distant. And Tyler, he was there. He listened." Her words hit me like a freight train, but I refused to let her twist this around. "So it's my fault now? I pushed you into his arms, is that it?" "No," she cried, shaking her head. "No, that's not what I'm saying. I take responsibility for what I did, Daniel. But things between us, they weren't perfect. Newsflash, Sarah. No marriage is perfect. But most people don't respond by screwing someone else and buying a house behind their spouse's back." She flinched, and for a moment, I thought I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. But it wasn't enough. Not after everything. "What's the plan now?" I asked, crossing my arms. "You move into your new love nest with Tyler and leave me to pick up the pieces? Is that how this works?" She hesitated, and that moment of silence spoke volumes. "You were never going to tell me, were you?" I said, my voice hollow. "You were just going to wait until the baby was born and then leave?" "I was trying to figure out the right time," she said weakly. "I didn't want to hurt you, Daniel." "Well, congratulations," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Mission accomplished. You didn't just hurt me, Sarah. You destroyed everything." She took a step toward me, her hands reaching out, but I stepped back. "Don't," I warned. "Don't you dare try to make this better. There's no fixing this." "Daniel, please," she whispered, her voice desperate. "I still care about you. I didn't want it to end like this." "Care about me?" I said, laughing bitterly. "You care about me? That's rich coming from the woman who stole my name, my credit, and my trust." Tears streamed down her face now, but I felt no sympathy. I was too far gone for that. "I'm done, Sarah," I said firmly. "You've made your choices. Now live with them." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't stay to listen. I grabbed my keys and walked out, slamming the door behind me. The crisp night air hit my face, but it did little to clear my head. As I sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel, 1,000 emotions crashed over me. Anger, betrayal, sadness, and a hollow sense of finality. My marriage, my life as I knew it, was over. And now, I was left to pick up the pieces. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let her win. If she thought she could take everything from me and walk away unscathed, she was sorely mistaken. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I sat in the sterile office of a well-reviewed family attorney, my heart pounding as I recounted everything. Sarah's disappearance, the forged documents, Tyler, and the house she had purchased in my name. The lawyer, a sharp woman with an air of calm authority, took it all in without a hint of surprise. "This is layered," she finally said, leaning back in her chair. "But we have options." The forged signature is a good starting point. That's fraud, plain and simple, and it works heavily in your favor. The mortgage and credit trail can be disputed. What about the house? I asked. She used my credit for that. Am I stuck with it? She tapped her pen against the desk, her expression thoughtful. Not necessarily. It depends on how we approach it. If we can prove she misrepresented the purchase and that you didn't authorize the loan, we might be able to have it voided. But it's going to take time. And what about? I hesitated, my stomach churning at the thought. What about the affair? The baby? Her eyes softened slightly, but her voice remained professional. The affair is a moral issue, not necessarily a legal one, unless we can prove she used joint funds to support the relationship. As for the child, she paused. Are you certain it isn't yours? I swallowed hard, the weight of the question pressing down on me. She says it's his, Tyler's, but I don't know for sure. She nodded, jotting down notes. Then we'll add a paternity test to the list. It's important to be absolutely certain before we proceed with any agreements. As I left her office, clutching a folder of documents and instructions, I felt a small flicker of hope. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, piece by piece. When I returned home, Sarah was in the kitchen, staring blankly at a mug of coffee. She looked up as I entered, her eyes puffy and red. You didn't come home last night, she said softly. I stayed at a hotel, I replied curtly, brushing past her. Daniel, she began, her voice pleading. I turned sharply. Don't even try. Her lip quivered, but she nodded, as though she knew better than to push me. What happens now? She asked after a moment. I'm filing for divorce, I said bluntly, and I've contacted a lawyer to deal with the house and the fraud. She flinched, as if the word fraud physically hurt. I didn't mean to hurt you, Daniel, she said again. You have to believe that. Do I? I shot back. Do I have to believe anything you say anymore, Sarah? You've been lying to me for years. I don't even know who you are. Her tears started again, but I felt nothing. She had emptied me of every ounce of empathy I'd once had for her. You'll hear from my lawyer soon, I said, turning toward the stairs. And don't even think about touching our joint accounts. They've already been frozen. Over the next few days, the situation unraveled even further. My lawyer uncovered that Sarah had been funneling money from our savings to cover the down payment on the house. She had even used our shared funds to pay for Tyler's expenses, trips, meals, and hotel stays. The betrayal was deeper than I'd imagined, and each new revelation felt like another stab in the back. Sarah, for her part, seemed to shrink under the weight of it all. She stayed in the guest room, keeping to herself. I avoided her as much as possible, focusing on the legal battle ahead. But one evening, she approached me hesitantly, holding out a piece of paper. I've scheduled the paternity test, she said quietly. I took the paper without a word. The appointment was in 2 days. It would confirm what I already suspected, but I needed to know for sure. The day of the test was grim. Sarah and I sat in silence in the waiting room, the air between us heavy with unspoken words. She tried to meet my gaze once or twice, but I refused to look at her. The test itself was quick, just a cheek swab, but the implications were monumental. The results would take a few days, and those days felt like an eternity. When the email finally arrived, I stared at the subject line for what felt like hours before opening it. Paternity test results, 99.9% match, Tyler. It was official. The child Sarah was carrying wasn't mine. A wave of emotion washed over me. Relief, anger, and a deep, aching sadness. Any lingering hope I had clung to was gone. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd replaced me. I forwarded the results to my lawyer, who assured me it would strengthen my case for the divorce and the fraud investigation. Legally, I was untangling myself from Sarah and the life she had built behind my back. Emotionally, though, it was a different story. One night, as I sat in the living room, Sarah emerged from the shadows, her face pale and drawn. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice trembling. For everything. I looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than anger. Pity. She had destroyed herself as much as she had destroyed me. I know you are, I said finally. But it doesn't change anything. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and retreated to the guest room. That was the last real conversation we had. In the weeks that followed, I moved forward. The house was being seized, the mortgage voided due to fraud. The divorce proceedings were underway, and Sarah had moved out. Tyler, as far as I knew, had disappeared from her life as well. She was alone now, left to grapple with the mess she'd made. As for me, I was learning to rebuild. Slowly, painfully, but surely. The scars would remain, but they were a reminder of what I had endured and of the strength I had found to survive it.